Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, I welcome back to the podcast one of the savviest and experienced operators in the e-commerce world. Rob Schmults from Mid-Ocean Partners shares his quick 2 starts, 1 stop based on his observations of year 1 of the COVID era, and Veronika Sonsev and Scott Silverman, co-founders of CommerceNext, on how their powerful community led the way to their action-packed agenda. Rob, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I am great, Michael. Thank you. Thanks for asking. I couldn't help thinking that this is my 3rd time with you, but 2 of them have been during COVID. So I'll be excited to get back to the kind of conversation you and I had in the first one where we actually were facing each other in person. So hopefully that's months away, and we'll get back to that format, but we'll see.
Yeah, as I often say, it's great to hear your voice, but better to see you in person. But for now, this is the next best thing. So as you said, this is your three-peat. This is your 3rd time, actually in the same year. First time was on the streets of New York City during the NRF show, and you were a participant in CommerceNext in the summer, and you're back. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple things. First of all, for the listeners who may not have heard the first or even the second, give us a quick snapshot of who you are and what you do.
Great. So I work with a private equity firm called Mid-Ocean Partners, and I'm there in an operating role. Mid-Ocean focuses on middle market companies, think bigger than startups, but smaller than, giant globe spanning enterprises. Most of my time is spent helping the portfolio companies with kind of all things digital, e-commerce, online marketing, data analytics, et cetera. And then I also spend some time on diligence and new prospective acquisitions. Prior to that, I've had a variety of leadership roles, both as a retailer. Most recently was part of the leadership team at Talbot's, doing all things digital there. But also have been on, I'll put it in air quotes, on the vendor side, solution provider, selling technology solutions into the retail community. So have been lucky enough to work with some great teams on both sides of that equation.
Well, and I've described you as a triple threat because you've both been a retailer, you've been on the vendor side, and now you're on the private equity kind of side from an investment and the clear-eyed look at opportunities. So it brings such insight. So again, it's not your first time on the podcast, not your first time in this format. And I remember last time you had some great insights around the 2 starts and 1 stop. Now, that was 6 months ago. 6 months in these days is a long time ago. So I'm kind of keen, given what you've just experienced, what we've all just experienced over the past 6 months or so, or even 4 months, how are you now thinking about what retailers should start doing and what they might want to stop doing for 2021?
I guess for the first start, I think, and you and I in our pre-interview conversation, which went to a lot of interesting topics, maybe we should have recorded that one. But one of the things we talked about was just how companies have been managing through the pandemic, and frankly, I think a lot of credit goes out to all those leaders and those teams and all the work they've done to drive, I think, what for many companies was a pretty not startling but impressive spike in team productivity and ability to get things done. I think on the start front, we're hopefully in the home stretch around the pandemic. We're coming to the end of the year, the holidays. These are natural drivers of people maybe needing and wanting to catch their breath a little bit. And I think what got you here may not get you there. So I'd encourage leaders and teams to start thinking about what they're going to need to do to keep their team and their colleagues engaged and energized in 2021. If you think about it, everyone's really been through the ringer, whether they show it or not. And we've had this incredible response from teams, across companies, across industries, in terms of bringing, effort to the table and productivity and adapting and commitment and doing everything they can to help their businesses survive and in some cases thrive in this very challenging time. There's obviously what comes with that is there's a toll. And so I think particularly post-holiday, team members, this is often a time where teams get to exhale, particularly in retail, right? You sort of pass that final ship window. You get to, the 25th. they're not going to have their normal holiday. They're not going to have quite the downtime they got. A lot of them aren't going anywhere. They're probably just going to keep working. And so, how are you going to re-energize that team? What are you going to do to help them recharge? And, I think we can all expect that poaching of talent is probably going to go up a lot after this holiday. That's always been a persistent problem in e-commerce and retail. But I think it's going to reach new heights as so many companies saw their entire business shift to digital and realized they're going to need to either deepen or broaden their team. So anyway, start thinking, maybe hopefully you already have started. If you haven't, you better start thinking about that. So that's one start. For a second start, maybe it's kind of an analogous, is what are your contingency plans for a post-COVID world? How much business do you think is likely to flow back to offline? And how might that shift your spending and prioritization? How are you thinking about that comp problem? If you had a good pandemic in terms of, if you were in home improvement or some of the categories that have done
furniture
really well,
or whatever. Yeah, sure.
You've got a comp problem coming up, and what are you going to do to compensate for that COVID bounce maybe not being there for you in 2021? Alternatively, if you had a really tough 2020, maybe you're in apparel. What are the triggers? What are the milestones that you need to watch for and act on? So now's the time to amp back up that marketing spend. We need to go deeper on inventory buys. We need to have manage our promotional cadence accordingly to capture demand that may exceed, knock on wood, may exceed supply. So I think.
Well, your point about when to cut the purchase orders is very germane, because it will be unusual because everyone will be thinking the same thing at the same time. We're already in a place where it's hard to get on a boat from China to North America. Any of your goods, it's sold out for months because of everybody's doing the same thing all at the same time. So I think that that's been facing the furniture folks and the home improvement. I think it's going to it'll be an interesting who bets first from the apparel side, because there's also, I've been hearing, a consolidation of factories in China as they've lost customers, of course, and lost volumes. So there's less factories who will all be suddenly all asked to make more stuff. It'll be another bottleneck, a better bottleneck than we have today, so to speak. But you raise a really interesting point there.
Yeah, no, I think that color you added is exactly the right color. And so thinking through your contingencies, your triggers, what is going to be the sign that says, okay, do X or stop doing Y? Getting that sorted out. So just
when do you put your chips down? When do you make that bet, right? When do you think people are going to start traveling again, and then they're going to need luggage, or they're going to need, all those great things that we used to need?
That's right. So it's just like what we did in COVID, except now we've got a little more luxury to know this is coming, right? There will be another side, and that's predictable. Whereas what we experienced in the beginning part of 2020, we had to scramble. Take what you did when you scrambled and think about how you can apply it and leverage it now under a more predictable set of occurrences. So yeah, very, very much agree with the examples you gave.
Right on. All right. Well, again, so those are the two great things that retailers should be thinking about. What should they consider not doing for 2021 that they maybe have or seen other people do?
I think my stop may be a bit of if not a blatant plagiarization of my earlier stop or start. I think it's on a similar theme, which is stop under-resourcing your digital efforts. But if I am repeating myself, and I should have checked, but if I am, it's just that this is such a common problem. And if COVID did nothing, it hopefully gave you, if you're a digital leader or a team in the digital space, the credibility you need to go back to your management team, your board, your CFO, and really make the compelling case that digital roles and talent are critical, even outside of a pandemic. And I think one of the things I think that digital is so blessed with, but the digital managers don't always take advantage of, is that talent and bringing in headcount in this space it so uniquely lends itself to a clear payback window, right? Because we have so many closed loops. If I did X and I got Y, think about things like ROAS, et cetera, right? And you can use that same data that you use to evaluate and project forward what a new marketing program or an overhaul might look like or an investment might look like. You can use that same methodology to think about what a person or additional talent might look like, and then articulate that outcome, and you can report back on it. So use that, use the credibility you've gotten in COVID and the heightened awareness companies now have how critical this space is. Use the fact that you have the metrics to show I did X and I got a return of Y to make a clear payback, and go out and get that talent and get those new roles you need to help you to keep driving forward in 2021. So that's how I would frame up stop under-resourcing your digital efforts.
I guess nested in that stop is your belief that this great acceleration, this big shift, whatever, pick a number, how many years ahead, that we're not going backwards to where we were pre-COVID in terms of the amount of retail done online. Is that your assessment? Is that the waterline is permanently moved up, and that when stores are open and we're in a post-vaccine world, that things don't return to the way it was in January 2020. Is that your assessment of your observation?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think the high tide mark may come back a little bit. Maybe in some cases even more than a little bit. But so many new behaviors have been learned. So many people that hadn't maybe previously been leveraging digital are now over the hump, and it's become habit. I heard someone talking the other day about how habits form after about a month or so. And so we've had it's been 9, 10. So we've got new habits formed that are going to have to be, frankly, broken for it to really go back to where things were. And I just don't think they will be. Yeah. And there'll be a lot.
I interviewed Roger Martin, a kind of a global thinker, my dean from Rotman. He called habits decaying assets on the balance sheet. And I don't think we figured out a time when those habits break or are formed, but they certainly decay. And I think, to your point, by the time the COVID era is over, it could be the fall, right? So that's a long span of time. That's 18 months, whether it's 2 months or 60 days or whatever it takes to form a new habit.
And you know what I think too? I would encourage people to think more broadly than just say conversion rates or demand, right? And again, you and I were talking about this pre-recording a little bit. I absolutely think there's pent-up demand. Like, people are just going to want to go back into stores and experience stores again. Yes. I think the first time
you feel normal again, right? I mean, as you and I know, retail isn't just about a transaction. If that was the case, we'd just all go online. It's an experience. It's cultural. It's social. It's all those things put together. I mean, it's hard to be inspired really online for impulse buying. I mean, that's one of the things that people have been telling me, right? Is like, I've been married for a long time, so I like to go to a store and just wander around and have inspiration hit me. So this time, the inspiration is just harder to come by online.
Yeah, you said it really well. And so I think looking past just your conversion rates, which I'm sure will bounce around as places come out from under the shadow of COVID. But, what does this mean for, say, content creation, right? I think one of the things you and I talked about when we last spoke is the notion that the psychological barrier so many brands had to doing more with video content, where they set this artificially high barrier of Super Bowl quality, ad production values, and now realize that, oh my gosh, people, TikTok is actually can be a really valuable communications vehicle. All the how-to content that people are tapping into on YouTube, et cetera, they're both going to be differences in how our consumers are interacting with us and what they're willing to engage in and at what level, et cetera. But also recognize that your organization and your own internal stakeholders may also have moved to a new place. And so that's going to drive, I think, lasting change for us as well as retailers and brands, as we go through 2021 and beyond.
Well, last quick question for you. What are you doing at CommerceNext? Are you moderating a panel, or tell us what you're doing at the event?
Yeah, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. So yes, I'm a moderator, but it's great. And I got to give a little shout out to the CommerceNext team. I think they've created so much valuable content and created space for that content to just be disseminated. I know I personally have learned a lot from their sessions, and so I'm looking forward and I'm honored to be able to participate in the event that's coming up in the early part of 2021. And my panel's on what I call an evergreen topic, which is, what should the marketing organization look like? The exact title is The Marketing Org, Building a Team for Today's Growth Challenges. And so I've got great panelists, some old friends, some new faces. Billy May, the Chief Customer Officer, Jay Crew, Jennifer Olson, who's the CMO at Untuckit, and Shauna Hausman, the CMO at Healthy Commerce. And they bring not just the experiences that they have at their current roles, but also having all held a series of roles and seen a lot of different things and a lot of different marketing organizations. And so I'm really excited about that. And then just as importantly, they've seen how broader organizations interact with the marketing organization, right? Because it's not like your marketing org sits in a vacuum. It's a piece in a puzzle. So that's a thing we're going to get into as well. So I'm really looking forward to it.
No, that sounds great. I mean, I've always thought as a marketer, the intersection and interaction with the merchants, for example, not just the store operators, is so crucial that to have that interaction and not be an island of out on your own. So I'm really looking forward to that. Such a great, you're an amazing MC, bring insights to that and a great panel. So Rob, thanks again for being on the Voice of Retail podcast in this CommerceNext preview edition. I look forward to catching up with you again for the podcast next year, and then if all goes well, seeing you in person. I look forward to that.
Yeah, no, I share that, and wish all your listeners a healthy and happy and safe holidays.
Veronika and Scott, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you both doing?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, doing well. Nice to talk to you again, Michael.
Well, it's great to have you back on. We're talking about CommerceNext, and we you had the opportunity to introduce yourselves and your great backgrounds in more detail on a prior episode. So I'll put that in the show notes so folks can go listen. But just for the folks who maybe didn't hear about that, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start talking about CommerceNext. Veronika, why don't we start with you?
Sure, Michael. So the quick intro, I am one of the co-founders of CommerceNext. We're a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and direct-to-consumer brands.
And I'm also one of the co-founders of CommerceNext, along with Veronika and Alan Dick. I have been in the retail, e-commerce, digital retail space for more than 20 years. I didn't have gray hair when I got started.
And Scott, you and I have known each other for many of those years, actually. And Veronika, you and I have met just recently. Veronika, I want to congratulate you, and let's start with you. I want to congratulate the whole team on transforming CommerceNext into what I think is one of the leading digital conferences online. Moving with the COVID era from in-person to online video conferences. What did you learn along the way? Like, how did you successfully bring the community along so that you just kept the same kind of vitality of thought leadership?
Michael, it's definitely been a journey for us. I have to say, before COVID, we were primarily known for a large in-person event that would take place over the summer and have about 1,000 people come to New York for a conference. And so obviously, the moment that COVID hit, that was no longer possible. But we were really quick to jump into virtual events. We started our weekly webinar series in, I think it was March, if not early April. We've held 26 webinars since the start of COVID. Yeah.
26. Wow.
Yes. We also held our annual summit virtually, and we did a holiday summit virtually. And Scott and I used to host dinners all over the country. And we've moved to doing virtual lunches. So think of those like roundtable discussions on Zoom, and we've also done virtual happy hours. So we've gone from a company that did over 50 live events a year to one that has done over 50 virtual events this year. And we've learned a lot along the way. It's definitely been a walk, crawl, run approach. Our first webinars were slides and audio, and now we're doing video with lower thirds and all kinds of fun stuff. So we are grateful that we have such a generous community that has come to us as a resource for information and also just shared with us everything that they're learning so that we can be that resource for the community, really kind of worked with us along the way while we were learning through all of this.
Well, I mean, congratulations. I mean, one of the things I want to talk about quickly, just hang on that for a minute, is the format. I think initially when people like March, April, May, or whatever, it was like, okay, I'm going to take a conference. It's an all-day conference, so I'm going to do an all-day video conference. And I think it quickly became apparent to many that was just not going to work exactly in the same way. So, how did you flex the main CommerceNext event so that you kind of flexed to what folks were looking for and wanted to participate in and watch?
Yeah, so that definitely was an evolution for us. So one of the things that we learned really early on is with virtual events, people are a lot more fluid. So when you go to a conference, you dedicate that time more or less to that conference. You're there for a couple of days and you go to the sessions, you go to the exhibit hall, you spend your time in that location and you're mostly there. When you're going to a virtual conference, it's much more integrated into your day. You may have a conference call in between. You may be only going for one session. You may be going through several sessions. So kind of taking that learning that this is a much more fluid experience for our marketing summit series, we're actually doing it over the course of 3 weeks. It is 3 Wednesday afternoons, and then we're doing bonus tracks on Fridays with some interactive sessions. And that's because we know that, people are not going to be there with us for the whole half a day each day. They're going to come in and out for the content that they want. And we wanted to really kind of spread it out and have it be as undisruptive to their week as possible and still kind of keep a rhythm that they could follow and kind of put in their schedule.
Scott, from format best practices to the event itself, give me a sense for how you program a conference to reflect the lessons of the first year of retailing in the COVID era. How did you think about putting the cast of characters together and the content?
Well, I'll take the first part of your question first. Just to be clear, it's January 20th. 27th and February 3rd. Those are all Wednesdays. And then the Fridays between on January 29th and January 22nd, we're doing the bonus tracks that Veronika was talking about. The Wednesdays, well, all of them are half-day length sessions. We have a number of speakers lined up for all of these. In terms of how we went about building out the agenda, we have I think a combination. There's a number of themes. I won't go into all of that now, but I think it kind of breaks down into there are new things happening that are driven by consumer trends and technology, things like video and podcasting and new AI and so on. So there's a big theme of sessions that dig into that a little bit. There's a number of sessions that are focused more on the social involvement of retailers, kind of purpose-driven brands and brands that are marketing around social challenges and that type of thing. And then there are kind of also within all of this is recognizing the impact that our business is having due to COVID and due to the economy that has been caused by COVID. I encourage folks to go and look at the agenda. You'll see kind of one of those 3 major kind of threads throughout just about every session in the agenda.
Veronika, so we've heard about the content strategy, so to speak, that you've culled together as a team. How did you go about finding the right people to reflect that and to talk about that?
I want to just kind of first add to what Scott said. The way that we figure out what we want to cover, and it's also how we find the right types of speakers that we want to add to the agenda, is we work really closely with our advisory board. Our advisory board includes a combination of traditional large-scale retailers, more digital-first direct-to-consumer brands, as well as some kind of industry consultants and thought leaders. And we survey them and we ask them, what are topics that they think are really relevant to them? And it's through that survey that we collect information, put together an agenda, and then get their feedback on the agenda. Out of all of that work kind of came the themes that Scott mentioned. Our speakers for this year are really amazing. We have Deborah Yeh, the CMO of Sephora, RJ Siley, who's the CDO of HBC, Bob Sherwin, the VP of Marketing at Wayfair, Billy May, the Chief Customer Officer of J.Crew, Jenny Olson, the CMO of Untuckit, Robert Toss, the Chief Growth Officer of 800 Flowers. I can go on because it's really a great, probably one of our best speaker rosters yet. And we try to accomplish a few things when we recruit speakers. We want both traditional and direct-to-consumer brands. We think there's magic when those perspectives can be shared, exchanged, compared, contrasted. So we look for, you have these big established companies like Sephora speaking on the same agenda as smaller companies like Untuckit or Food 52. Mm-hmm. And then we also look for diverse speakers. You'll see that we probably have almost as many women as men. We really strive to have 50-50 gender equality. And then we look for, we try as much as possible to be able to incorporate minority point of views as well. So I'm very proud of kind of the speakers that we have on the agenda and the different points of view that they bring to the audience.
Where should people go to learn more about CommerceNext and to register? And then how much is it? And give me some 411 about that.
So very simply, you can go to CommerceNext.com. It'll be very evident where to find more information on the Marketing Summit series, and we'll include a URL to go specifically to all the details for it in the show notes. The pricing is free for retail executives, direct-to-consumer brand executives. And also, we know a lot of folks in our community are between positions. There's a lot of churn in terms of people moving in and out. Some people, there's been layoffs, and we want to keep the conversation and the education going for those folks. So we have a special free ticket for them. For solution providers that are not sponsors of ours, we have a modest fee of $49 for folks to attend.
Oh, that's great. And just on the last part, is the door still open for sponsors? Are you kind of done? I mean, we're pretty close to the event, actually, in the world of conferences. We're
always happy to have conversations with potential sponsors. We fortunately are just about sold out, but there's still a few openings. And, if there's a good fit, we would love to have some of those folks involved.
Fantastic. So I'll put your connection, LinkedIn and all that for both of you there as well, just to round that up. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to it. This series, I'm going to be talking to some of the great speakers that you've got and just asking them a couple of quick questions just to give a hint of the great content that is to come up. And I think we'll all be looking forward to. So great to hear your voice. Thank you both for joining me on The Voice of Retail. And I look forward to all those sessions in January and February and learning from the best and brightest. So thanks for bringing that to the industry.
Well, thank you for your partnership and inviting us to talk about this today.
Well, thanks to Rob, Veronika, and Scott for being my guests on this episode. Today's podcast is the first in a series of CommerceNext episodes that will feature some of the fantastic speakers taking the virtual stage January 20th, 27th, and February 3rd with snapshot insights into how they dealt with online and e-commerce in the first year of the COVID era and lessons learned for the future. Learn more and register for CommerceNext on CommerceNext.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Rate and review, be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc and Company Inc. You can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.